Hi, this is the final part 3 series of Google API authentication and accessing the Google resources via Power Automate. In my previous video, I have shown how to obtain the authorization code. That's a part 1 video, and part 2 I have explained how to retrieve access token and refresh token. If you haven't seen those videos, please have a look. All links are under the video description. Remember, I have mentioned in my part 2 video series that access token will expire after a certain time and refresh tokens never expire. The refresh token will expire when the user revokes access to your application. So it's important to note your refresh token, client ID and client secret for accessing Google API. In this video, we will have a look at how to use refresh token and access a Google resource. So here in my example, I'm going to show you how to access Google Drive. Remember, in my first video, I have put the scope as Google Drive. So it's very important when you first get the authorization code, you need to specify your resource, which resource you are going to access, whether it's a Google Drive or email or whichever the resource it is. And there you can also specify it's a read-only operation or read-write operation or read-write and delete operations you want to do. I have put the relevant links under the part 1 video series of that. Okay, so please check that out. And also in this video, there is a Power Automate community question related to accessing Google Drive. So I will show you that as an example as well here, how to access using the refresh token, getting the access, using the refresh token, getting the access token to access the Google Drive. Okay, so let's have a look at this diagram now. Okay, so remember the part 1, I have explained the request token, user login and consent, getting the authorization code. In my part 2 video, I have explained how to get the exchange code token and the token response for that. That is the access token and the refresh token ID. Okay, so those two I have explained in part 1 and part 2 of my video series. Okay, now in this series, I'm going to show you how to call the refresh token and access the Google resource. So let's start, create a new Power Automate project. And for the demonstration purpose, I'm going to use a manual trigger. And then under that, I'm going to use a HTTP action step to execute the refresh URL to get the access token. Okay, so let's start building the flow now. Okay, so I have set a manual trigger. The next action step I'm going to use is the HTTP step. Right, and I'm going to add some note here. The note is okay, retrieve access token via refresh token. Yeah. And then here the method I'm going to use here is the post. The next the URL here is we need to use here is the accounts.google.com/o/002/token. Okay, and then I'm going to set a content type. So that's the content type I'm going to set. Next, I need to put JSON values under the body. Okay, so remember in my part 2 video, I have explained we need the client ID, client secret, then the refresh token. Okay, so I have already got that information in my hand. So we need always the refresh token ID, client ID, and the client secret. So keep that in a safe place always. So, you know, in case if you lose that, then you need to go through the step part 1 and part 2 video series, which I explained again. So if you want to, you know, keep accessing the token, you need those 3 information all the time. Okay, so that's the information earlier we got: client ID, client secret. So I'm going to use JSON format here so that I can just copy that under the body. And there is one more step we need here, is the grant type refresh token. Grant type is the refresh token we are going to use. So remember, in my other the part 2 series, we have the body that is grant type is authorization code, and that returns our access token and the refresh token. But here the grant type is the refresh token. That's the difference here. Okay, and also of course the refresh token also. Whereas in the second video series, we need client ID, we need the code, that's from the video series 1, then client ID 1, client ID and the client secret, redirect URI, and the grant type is authorization code. Okay, that returns me the refresh token and the access token, but I'm not going to use as access token. As I mentioned, always the access token got a 1 hour, default is the 1 hour time limit. I don't know how to extend that. So the best way to do is to keep the refresh token, so you can call as many times as you want. Here we go. So that's the format I'm going to use. I'm going to copy this and paste that under the body here. Okay, I think I got everything here. So now I'm going to run this flow and see the result. Okay, so I have authenticated the Google Drive connector, and I set a directory /project. Remember, I haven't used the bearer token, the access token here, right? I'll show you, you know, I need to execute this first and show you what's happening behind the scene. So that's a standard connector, you know, from the Google, which provided the Google Drive one, which we can list the files. So I can see, here we go, there are some files out there, and it's showing the files there. And so what happened here is I put /project, And there are a couple of other directories also there. So there is something called /power automate there. So what happens if I put /power automate? Let me change that. I'm going to put /power automate. Just try to run this now and see what's the result. Here we go. It couldn't be able to evaluate it, and that's what this community question is saying here. Like when it is redefined, the flow becomes success. So that means if I go back and browse it manually like this, if I go to the Google Drive and browsing it manually, I set Power Automate. Now I'm going to run the flow now again. Here it is. So that's another directory it found, and the files, it's lists the files under the folder. So what happened behind the scene is, if you look the peak code, there is an ID here. See that ID here? So this ID is the metadata for that. So if we know the ID behind the scene, we can map that. That's what I found out. So if we know the ID dynamically, we can place, it will work. But there is no other way we can't get the ID unless we use the Google API. So Google Drive API allows to get that ID. That means once you got the ID, then we can place the ID here under the list files in folder, or we can directly use another HTTP call to get the list files as well. So that's up to the developer to decide it, how they want to execute it. So here I'm going to show you that method, how to get that HTTP action step. So another HTTP call here again. And this is going to be a get operation. And before that, I'm going to add a compose here. So that will be much easier then. That's a URL. Okay. So that's the URL API URL of Google Drive. So that's a folder one. So there is a format here. You can look the Google documentation for that. There are lots of documentation out there for Google Drive API. And you can see, so from there I found out that you need to use the Drive version 3 files (?), then the parameter q equals, then name is equal to, then I'm going to use here the name equals Power Automate. Okay, so that's that. And then here I am going to map, and also here I put and mime type equals application / vnd dot google -apps dot folder. That means this API connection is only going to look that folder only. So that's the good news here for that. There is as I mentioned, look the documentation for those formats. Yeah. Okay, so next thing is I'm going to map that URL here. Okay, that I got. And then I need to put header. The header is accept, and that is application /JSON. Then we need the authorization here, authorization, and there is a bearer token. So you need to type bearer. Then after that you need to put a space. That's quite important. And then go to the access token. See, that's access token we are getting from the API call. So that means we are going to execute this API via the bearer token. And then again there is a MIME type. I'm not sure. Yeah, so yeah, we need to pass the MIME type also here to say only look that folder only for that, so application / this. That's it basically. So let me try to run this. So I'm going to delete this now, right? And try to run that. Oh, that's a failure here. Access not configured. Drive API has not been used in project. before it's disabled. Enabling by visiting. Okay, so there is something I need to enable it here for this API access for the project. Right, so let me minimize this and go into this API here. I believe we need to give the authorization for accessing that for that project. So let me go back here. That's the project. Remember in the first video series we made all that. I put all this. So under here there is something called authorized domains. No, enable API and services. Yeah, that's the first one. Yeah, enable API and services. Just click on that and then search here Google Drive. That's the one. So you need to, there are different categories for the Google services here. So you need to, whichever the API you want to access, you need to enable that. So here we go, Google Drive API. I'm going to enable that and say enable. Okay, so that's done. So it says enable the API now. If you want to disable it, you can click on disable API. Right, let's try to rerun this again. So edit, test, again running it manually here. Here it is. So that's run successfully now. So make sure that need to be enabled. Okay. Right, I'm going to take this body here and let's have a quick inspection of the body here. See that the files which contains the ID also here. See that that's the ID I'm interested in for that Power Automate. See Power Automate ID here. So to do that, there are different ways you could access that information. So I'm going to go with the basic steps. Again, another parse JSON. Map the output of the previous HTTP2 call, that is this. Place a cursor inside the schema, click on the generate sample, paste it and click done. So now I can see there is a file is an array here. Okay, so let me go back to the new step and add a compose and then map the files. Here it is, that's the files there. Yeah, try to run this again. Okay, flow ran successfully and I got that file section part here. You can, as I mentioned earlier, you can do this directly, put the HTTP action step with question mark and the tag with the files and all. I'm going to go with the basic step. So if you're very new to Power Automate, it might help this way. So here, what I did is I extracted that file section only in my combos again. Okay, that's what I did. I'm going to copy again this details here. It's an array, remember, and it's only one record only here because we are looking only one folder only here. See the folder name, it's called Power Automate. Okay, so we're always going to get one record, otherwise there won't be, if the folder is not there, it's always going to be none. Okay, so next again adding another parse JSON step. Okay, map the output from the previous combo step here. That's that output. Place the cursor in the schema, click sample and copy that file again, the compose result. Click done. So this way I can get now the ID now. Okay, so that's ID now. Now the next step then is very quite a simple step to do now. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to add the OneDrive connector now here, Google Drive connector here. So go into Google Drive, right, and list the files in folder, and here now I can dynamically map. I'm not going to browse it, I'm going to dynamically map the ID now. Don't worry about this loop because that result set, it's coming as an array because we are finding a folder exists or not, but the return the type is it's an array. It always contains one record anyway, so we don't need to much worry about the apply to each loop. Right, so that's list files in folder. Then I'm going to click test and run the flow. Okay, looks like a flow ran successfully. So here you can see I have dynamically mapped the ID, and under the Power Automate folder, is it the Power Automate folder I looked? Let me have a look. Yeah, that's a Power Automate folder, Power Automate, and I got the ID here. That's the ID for that. And again, if I go down, that's the ID I mapped. So let me go back and inspect it again. I was suspecting some files there. Okay, I got it. I had to use this connection. I used the wrong connection there again because I got two different email address I have. Okay, so I'm going to run this now again and test it. Make sure you need to use the right email address. While they're running, I'll show you. See here under the APIM directory, remember the first video series I mentioned about the console cloud google.com. So that's the account. This is the account you need to use. So here, that's my account. That's the account you need to authenticate using the list files in folder also in Power Automate. Otherwise it won't work. Okay. Right, looks like the flow ran successfully now, and hopefully in the list folder we have, there is a file there. So if I change my URL again to another directory, so let's go back to the directory again. So this I'm going to change to another existing directory there. Okay, so I have three different folders here. So I'm going to use project now, project folder. So let's go back to the Power Automate and change the folder name to project. Okay, so I'm going to test this to project. Here it is. So remember, here I'm dynamically putting the ID, not using any browse, and executing the URL, which is the Google Drive API URL with the bearer token we got from the refresh token mechanism. So remember, we can execute as much as we want for the refresh token, right, to get the access token using the refresh token. Right, I'm going to run this now. Hopefully I should have one file under that project folder also. Okay, looks like flow is running. Here it is. So this is a technique we need to use to get the dynamic folder ID using the Google authentication methods, which I explained from part 1 and part 2. That part 1, part 2 is always a manual method to find those the code and the refresh token token ID. So once you got all those two details, then we have the client ID and the client secret, which we can pass and get the refresh token. That's the bearer token we need to use for accessing the Google APIs. Hope this is useful, and thank you for watching.